Okay, so let's take a look at the homework assignment. Homework assignment is write a program and compute the sum of all the even integers from 1 to n, right? And n is given by the user, and then you're supposed to use a for loop. So if you look at the test case, when the user enters a 6, your output of your program should be 12 because sum of 2, 4, 6 is a 12. So that's like sum of all the what? 2, 4, 6, that's the sum of all the even integers. So for the demonstration purpose, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to write a code which computes all the integers from 1 to n, right? And then I'm going to show you another program which compute all the odd integers. And then from using those two hints, two examples, you can, I'm sure that you can write a program which can sum of all the even integers. Okay. So now, before we write any code, I want to take a look at this loop. I mean this slide, the part number 3 loop slide. So this is chapter 4, loop part number 3. And if you look at the syntax for this for statement, you know we have 3 different variations, right? The first one is with the one argument. The sequence will start with a 0 and up to the sequence will, the maximum value of this sequence is going to be this number minus 1. The 5 minus 1 is a 4. And then the second variation is, the range with the 2 arguments. The sequence start with the first argument. So that's why the value of I is going to be what? 1 all the way to 4, which is 5 minus 1. And with the 3 arguments, the third argument is the step value. So the value of I is going to range from 1, right? But it's going to be increment by 2 because step value is a 2 and up to 10. 11 minus 1 is 10. Okay? So now, so it's going to be 1. 1 plus 2 is a 3. 3 plus 2 is a 5. And then 5 plus 2 is a 7. And then 7 plus 2 is 9. But it's going to stop here. The reason is if you add 2 to 9, it's going to be 11, which is the exceed this maximum value, right? The maximum value for the in the sequence should be 10 or less, right? Because 11 minus 1 is a 10, so that's the maximum value that I can have, right? So this is another example. When you look at the third example, range, starting value I, when you look at the value of I, the starting value should be 0. The maximum value should be 9 minus 1. The maximum value of I should be 9 minus 1, which is 8. And the since the step value is a 2, the value of I is going to be a multitude of 2, starting from the 0. So 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. Now, so let's just open a Python shell. Okay, and then file, open, new, open file. First I'm going to write a program which just simply my program is going to simply add all the integers from 1 to n or 0 to n. So let's say for max value is no, I'll just say num. So not the for loop. If the num is equal to input, enter a number. Right, enter a number. But this is going to return. This input is going to return a string value. So I need to use a function int. So this int is going to return an actual integer value, right? The num. And then I'm going to use a for loop. I in range 1 through the num, right? If you put the num, right? If you want to write a program which will add from 1 to all the way to the n, and when n is given by the user, you have to say num plus 1, right? So this is what starting values are 1. This is going to be all the way to what? The value of I is going to be starting from the 1 and all the way from n plus 1 minus 1. So basically up to none. So the sum is equal to sum plus I, right? But when I say print sum, this program will give me a syntax error. Okay, so let's just run. And first of all, I want you to stop this video tutorial, and then you should answer. You should be able to answer why this program, this code, will give me a syntax error. Right? You should be able to answer that question. Okay, please stop this video tutorial and think about it. But I'll just go ahead. When I run this module, I'll say HW3 part 2, and then I'll just put 10, right? So sum of the integers from 1 to 10, right? The answer should be 55, and give me some error, right? And I think the reason is, first, the Python compiler get into this for loop. First, take a look at this statement, right? And then they're gonna first execute the right-hand side of this assignment operator. So when the compiler look at I, the I is defined here. But when compiler try to look at to find the value of sum, they cannot really find a sum defined anywhere in this program, and so that's why the compiler now complains. So now, we have to define that sum is equal to 0. This is like. So we're gonna now, from this code, the sum is initialized to have 0 as its value. Now the sum is at 0, and then when I run this code, run module, and I'll say enter number. When I say 10, right, then the sum is a 55. And if you want to see how the value of I changes as the for loop proceed, you can simply add print statement, print I. Let's see, by the way, this is strictly for debugging purpose, right? So when I say 10, so you'll see 1 all the way to 10, right? So this is how you will see how the value of I changes, and then the 55 is the answer. Okay, but this is not what you want, right? You want a program which computes sum of all the odd integers, right? That's what you want, right? So let's just modify this code a little bit. First, let me just end my lecture here.